Hello, this is Jaime from the MidPointe Library System, and I'm one of the library specialists here at our libraries. And you'll see me at any location, but I'm also an artist on the side, and I am going to be showing you how to do what's called a mixed media greeting card. And especially right now with things being a little crazy, might be nice just to be able to make your own card to send to someone and send some love, a nice gesture, or to even write a little note in it. And because even though we have a lot of technology now where we can email or send messages through Facebook, it's nice to still get the regular snail mail every once in a while. That's still one of my favorites. And today, when it's mixed media, it means that you're using multiple mediums. Like usually you would draw with a pencil, but we'll also be using a ballpoint pen, a Sharpie. If you're going to use just regular copy paper, because that may be something that you will have at home, you may still use the Sharpie and pen. With the pencil, that's still fine. Usually these hold up pretty good for that. But I'll end up painting mine because I'll be using watercolor paper, which is a little thicker. But when you color yours, you could always do something like a Crayola washable marker to color it in, because that may be something you already have or your children have, or grandchildren even. In the house, and you can use that on the copy paper. And you could try the watercolor. It just remember that the water with the watercolor can kind of bog your paper down and makes it easier to tear. But just remember, whatever I'm doing, you can still do it on the regular copy paper. I'm just doing it on watercolor. And watercolor paper, if you are interested in getting some of it, I didn't show in my last videos that this is one of my personal favorite watercolor papers. It's by Canson, and all of their different kinds of paper are color coordinated, so they always use this blue for their watercolor pads. And 9x12 is the standard size for something like this in the art world. And then I think the next one's like 11x14 or 17. And then it'll just come as a pad with multiple sheets of paper. I found that Walmart's mostly the cheapest because it tends to be about $5.99. When you go to Michael's, it'll be closer to $10.99, which is insane. But sometimes we just have to find our deals where we can take them sometimes when we're artists. And especially if you want to just try out something. And you want to start out with a pencil most likely, because you may not be fully comfortable with starting out with pen. And I will try to draw kind of dark so that you can see what I'm doing for what I'm going to start with at the beginning. I just want to draw a heart, because most people know how to draw a heart, and it's fine if it's a little wonky. Sometimes I think hearts look neat when they're not perfect. So you want to draw from the center and go up a little mountain, curl down to your point, and then go from your point and try to fill up your paper as much as you can. And so you have a heart there. I did let it go off a little bit on the side. And say you didn't want that to happen. You should have an eraser. And if you use a pencil, then you can just erase what you need to. This is a no judgment zone whatsoever. And a lot of times I'll have a very sketchy line when I'm not entirely sure how I want something to look. And then you can continue with a pencil, but I'm going to go immediately to the ballpoint pen Because what we would do is if you do this next part in pencil, you would just go back over it with your ballpoint pen, which I just have a cheap Bic pen. That works just fine. And we're going to do a grid over top of it, but it's going to be a little different than your typical grid. So if you're familiar with seeing almost like a tic-tac-toe where it's usually straight lines, crisscrossing to make little squares and boxes, we're actually going to be doing the lines more slanted. So it kind of gives an interesting look to them and not your typical grid. So you would want a ruler, and let's start from left to right on your image. So the first line, let's do one a little toward the top corner on the left side, and then on the right we want it to come down a little further. And then draw your line and move down and flip-flop. So this time on the right side it'll be closer to the line we just created, and on the left side it'll be further apart. So I hope that makes sense, but you would just continue all the way down. You're really sectioning off areas on your piece. And it'll almost look like one of those, like if I dropped a ball up here, it would fall down each little angled line. And just continue to do it all the way down. You can make more space in between certain areas if you would like. And just in case if I've lost anyone or if you didn't see the list of supplies, this is 3 inches wide by 4 inches tall, just because we're going to put it on a card. And obviously we don't normally send something like this, but we'll have a backing to glue it onto. So once you get that, you can always turn it to the side or leave it straight up and down. And we'll do the same thing, but this time from top to bottom, maybe the top being closest to the corner and the bottom being further to the right and away from the corner. Draw your line. Do the opposite where you're closer to the bottom line and further apart at the top. And closer to the top, further from the bottom. Draw your next line and just keep going across. And what I love about this is it's still kind of abstract, but it gives something to everyone, even if you're not familiar with drawing. It still creates a real neat graphic to use for a card. And we didn't have to do a heart. If you wanted to do like a sun or even just a circle or kind of a bullseye, it would still work. Diamond shaped, really whatever you want. Say you finished your pencil lines at this point, then you can go ahead and go over top of your pencil lines with the pen. But since I've already done the pen, I'm going to grab my Sharpie, because even though it says fine point, and you can get a really fine point with this type of marker, it is thicker than the ballpoint. And so here's already, we've used pencil. Now we already did the ballpoint, so that's your second medium. And now we've got our third, which is the Sharpie. And why I normally do something like this for this type of thing is it really helps the heart stand out because it's already thicker than the ballpoint pen. But you could always make it way thicker to your heart's content, whatever you want, because line thickness does affect the way we see things. So the thicker your line, the more dominant it's going to look. Especially using black, we really could use a colored marker and colored pens. That's something that you can experiment with. And say your mom really loves blue, maybe you should do all of this in blue ink. Because Sharpies, of course, come in multiple colors. And believe me, I have a lot of them because I do love color. And something especially coming out of school where we always had to plan a ton of our drawings and our images and art pieces, and I really got bogged down with the expectations. I ended up switching over to Sharpies frequently and would draw stuff like this, just going straight to ink and not even using pencil. And if I made a mistake, I tried to work with it and learned how to make adjustments. And I think that can really add a different dimension to your own personal artwork. Even though it is important to do thumbnail sketches and kind of work out your ideas, but it's also nice to just kind of relax and have a moment where you can kind of center yourself and not be worried about making something look perfect, because all of us artists are extremely hard on ourselves, and it's hard not to be. And with something like this, it's just so much fun and easier to just sit back and relax with it. So how I'm going to color this, I'm going to use the watercolor palette here. This is just a Crayola watercolor palette. And what I'm going to do is I want the heart to be more warm colors. And warm colors on a color wheel, as you can see, are on this side. So it's going to be your yellows, your reds, oranges, and your red violets. While your cool colors, which tend to recede, are going to be our background, because your warm color is going to kind of pop out, which we want the heart to do that. So what I'm going to do, wet my brush and get my red wet. And this is something where you can experiment more with your coloring. Like maybe let's just make this all really light red, so it kind of has this pink tone. And even though we have all these little boxes separating out the heart, we'll just paint the whole thing so that we have a nice wash. And if it has trouble spreading, you need to add more water to your brush. And normally to do some large area, I would grab a larger brush, but we want to do some tiny detail here in a second, so might as well keep the smaller brush. So with less water on your brush, but more of your color, just start isolating parts within the heart and making them a little darker. So there's a little square there, and this one. And you don't have to stay within the lines, but try to just get some areas that are sectioned off from our ballpoint pen. And it doesn't have to be even. You can do some next to it, like even though we have a lot of dark red there, do some next to it as well. You don't have to do every other. And you don't have to follow the grid, so maybe over here, just kind of pick some spots, make it a little darker. Watercolor does best when you build the color. If you start soft or light, it'll do a lot better than if you try to add a lot of dark all at once. Adding a lot of dark all at once will kind of make it difficult for you to come back from the darkness. You want it to just gradually build. And I'm just trying to make it sort of even looking, but I'll give it a chance to dry. I washed my brush because I'm going to change color now. And now we want to focus more on the cool colors, so like your green, blue, and purple. So let's start. I love purple, so I'm going to grab some purple to put in the background. And what's also nice too is don't get too crazy with the water. Since we made a pretty thick line of red, you've probably kept a lot of your water within the thick line. So you won't have a lot of crisscross of color, because watercolor paint will go wherever water is. So if this purple touches blue, they are going to mix. And I'll show you, I'll clean my brush off, because you want your brush to be as clean as possible. And kind of go in. And then you can see how it'll mix some with the purple on your paper. And just pick some areas. And like I said, keeping with colors in the background that are more cool will help push that background to the background. But you could always reverse it too. You don't have to follow exactly what I'm doing. Or maybe you want the whole thing to be different shades of red. And that's okay too. This is really just a way for you to experiment with how you want to create your card. And I want this to be fun. So this is just another thing that you can do that would be relaxing, but productive too. And sometimes it's hard at this time to feel productive when we're potentially stuck at home. And you can tell that I'm not really worried about making sure I'm staying within a certain box. I'm kind of letting like green be in multiple, but I'm wanting it to have different colors in the background, kind of in each little area, because it does help the eye move around to have the color in a little bit of every place that's in the background. So it pushes your eye. But once you get kind of filled out with your piece, like say you get to a finished point, and you may not have a whole lot of time to color it, you could always come back to it. Or like I said, if you're using markers, you can do the same idea. You probably won't be able to do a lot of light versus dark with a marker though. So it'd be very red or whatnot. So you could say if you had a pink marker and a red and maybe an orange, you could really do different spaces within that heart shape to create that reddish hue or the really warm color. Instead of just painting like I am, because I can get more variation in the shade with a color than you could with a marker. And then, let's see, so of course, then that watercolor or marker is kind of your fourth medium. Say once you got it done, like this one's a little further along. In fact, I could probably finish this up a little. Let's just finish that little white spot. You could always add more. I love these Sharpie silver metallic markers. You could always add something with that. And you can also use the Jelly Roll or any kind of gel pen. A lot of people will tend to have these, even their kids. And you can add little ornamentations to it. You could really just, if you wanted to with like a gold marker, just draw a line of gold within your black line to just add a little more shimmer. And this one's not super bright or anything, but you may have a brighter one. But you can just follow certain spots or add a little extra pattern within some of the squares if you wanted to. But at this point, say you were finished and you may have colored cardstock. I just wanted to show you an example of how much a color, because it's just like framing a piece of artwork. It will really change your piece depending on what color. And this card is really just about 4 1/4 wide, folded, by 5 1/2 inches high. And it's just a perfect piece where you could glue or even tape down this piece that you created. I would kind of push it toward the top a little bit. I think it looks really pleasing to the eye when it's not directly in the center, but you can do it directly in the center. But think about the color that you grab that's cardstock, because it can really change your piece. As you can see, this really pushes the red forward, but it may kind of overtake it. So I personally like the darker blue because it sort of calms and allows that red heart to really zing forward. And if you are creating a card, or even if you aren't creating a card, I would sign somewhere. Do little initials or sign on the bottom of the card to show that you created this. You should be proud of it. And then inside you can write a little message or write on a white piece of paper and glue it in as well. But it makes a great greeting card that will just be really special for whoever's going to be receiving it. And they really, I think a lot of people appreciate handmade stuff a lot more than they have been in the past. So I hope you have a great artistic adventure, and please experiment on your own, and I hope you have a lot of fun and enjoy your creative moment and peaceful space for the day. So thanks again. I hope you guys have a good one. See ya.